Where's the countdown?
Cool. That was a fun little video while we waited. Very exciting.
Very high energy.
Very high energy. Feeling pumped. So welcome everyone to Overdose and Chill Live. This is episode 95. I'm actually really surprised we've had 95 episodes. I've clearly missed a few, but that's very exciting. We are live streaming today on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So everyone that has tuned in today, please feel free to jump in with any questions throughout. I am particularly excited to have this conversation with Odette from Odette Co. For those of you that are listening today, I met Odette, I reckon about 8 years ago now. She was my first manager when I started out my career at the Australian Physiotherapy Association. Unfortunately, we're not going to talk about all the good times we had at that place today, but we were both in the marketing team, and that is actually where I was introduced to Laura, who is our Melbourne Managing Director, and Martin, who is our Shopify Tech Director. They had their own Shopify agency called Do Commerce, and once Odette left the APA, she actually did some PR work for them. And when I was sort of, considering a career change or the next steps, Odette really, thankfully introduced me to Martin and Laura at Do Commerce, which was then obviously snapped up by Overdose about 9 months later. I came along for the journey, and I've been working with them ever since and haven't looked back. But I'm obviously super grateful to Odette for teaching me so much back in the day at the APA when I was a real junior burger, but also for sort of introducing me to Laura and Martin and kind of pushing me to take that leap in my career. I was a bit daunted at the time. Lots of my friends that worked for agencies were like, don't do it, it's not good, like we don't like it. And I was like, oh God, am I making a bad decision here? But when I did talk to Laura and Martin in their very humble suite in St Kilda, one of the first things that Laura said to me was, look, we're just making websites, we're not curing cancer. And from that sort of message, I was like, okay, these are good people, they have a good operation here. And yeah, I've been with them ever since along the journey, which has been really, really wonderful. But
we're lucky to have you.
Hopefully they think the same, but anyway, they're not here to comment on that, so that's fine. But enough about, I guess, our history and me. Let's get into what we're going to be chatting through today. We've got about 45 minutes. People can jump in with any questions at any time. Odette and I are talkers. Hopefully we can stick to our questions that we've done. Yesterday we were supposed to catch up for 15 minutes. It was an hour and 15 minutes.
It included a tour of the Overdose office, which
True.
I really appreciated to see where your new headquarters are in Melbourne, which are very sexy. So it was worth it.
Yes. Clearly I'm not in the office today. This is my bedroom, or my second bedroom. We've just recently moved to the Commons in South Yarra, which is next level. The service is so incredible. We have free cereal, which is awesome. Everyone has like cereal at 3 o'clock every day. We don't even have to wash our own dishes. It's crazy. It's super, super great. But it's been really awesome for the team, I think, to get that kind of pep in their step again. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. So we're going to be delving into PR and what it actually is, talking about sort of taking the leap to start your own business, avoiding burnout, generating meaningful content, and where to invest with all the different channels out there today in the market. And of course, the relationship between PR and SEO and how important it is. Maybe a couple of other things, but Odette, let's get into it. But before we jump into your story and a little bit about Odette Co, for those listening that might not be fully familiar with PR or public relations, give us the rundown on what it actually is.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks so much for having me here. So PR, I guess there's so many like technical definitions that I think are absolutely useless. But I kind of think about PR as being the game of winning hearts and minds. It's really about changing the way people think and feel about us. And we can do this through lots of different channels, but typically PR is referred to in the traditional media space. So securing expert commentary, product placement, opinion editorial within the mastheads or TV broadcasts of news media. The definition of PR, I think, has expanded a lot towards like social media and influencers. And again, it sits in that space of top of funnel activity where you're really changing the way people think and feel about you. So I always think about it as reputation and reach as being like the primary goals of PR. And then we use the rest of our marketing mix to do that conversion. So we bring people closer to us and make them feel good about what we're doing.
Yeah, awesome. That's a much nicer way to sum it up than the, I guess, traditional or the, I guess, when people originally think about PR, it can be quite sterile and maybe a bit boring, but that definitely does, you know, I guess, relate a little bit more to what it actually is and what you do try and achieve through the channel.
Yeah, and I guess like for anyone that's still like, hang on, what is that? PRs generally, we like email and phone calls. That's our primary like mechanism for doing what we do. And we pitch stories to editors, producers, journalists, news anchors, all people across the media landscape with ideas for where our client or ourselves might be featured in their story. So it's very much about putting story ideas on a platter and inviting journalists to cover our stories.
Yeah, cool. And I guess the talent behind the, you know, public relations specialist is making sure that those stories are really engaging and they want to snap them up and take on that piece to promote it.
Totally. And I think probably where people get most confused is the delineation between advertising and PR, because often they sit side by side. You might see a product placement next to an editorial piece and one's paid and one's not. So I always think about the exchange. So in the advertising, we're using dollars and putting money on the table for that feature and that coverage. Whereas in the editorial and PR space, we're using our equity in terms of our reputation, why we're so interesting and fascinating and why we're so perfectly aligned to that outlet. And that's why we get the coverage.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hopefully that makes sense to everyone. I think that's a very good summary. So thank you for that. But tell me a little bit about why you decided to pack up the family and make the move to Byron Bay and start your own business. I know obviously Melbourne was way too cold for you. The fact that you're sitting in Byron right now in a turtleneck, you're probably cold. Cold has always been your thing. But yeah, tell us a little bit about making that change and taking that really big step, because it's obviously, you know, a pretty big decision to make, to leave a stable salary and go out and try something new. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I guess like numero uno, weather. You know, there's only so much Melbourne winter this girl can deal with. And also lifestyle. Like for me, the grind of, you know, working for someone else wasn't always, you know, perfectly in alignment with who I am. I'm definitely someone who operates a little bit outside of the box. I don't love rules. And so, you know, the entrepreneurial journey has actually, it's perfectly aligned with my values and my temperament. So, you know, when I talk about, you know, making a leap and people talk about the risk associated with it, it's actually much closer to my comfort zone to be in a place where I can call the shots, where I can like navigate my own territory. But yeah, moving from Melbourne, obviously it's a full reset. Friends, family, schools, like community, everything starts over. But that's also a beautiful opportunity to create a new life. I think as a needy extrovert, I got pretty busy on social media and with community events, getting out there and forging a new life. And yeah, I've been so beautifully rewarded in that process. Starting a business is one of the best ways to meet people because you're out there communicating. And I think also businesses operate in a really different way on social media than you do in your personal social media account. Like on my personal social media account, there is just zero chance I would ever message a stranger. Like it just would never happen. Whereas as a business on social media, you're really in this very open, collaborative, curious, creepy stalker mode where you are forging new connections all the time. And we were talking about this yesterday about like some of the keys to what really made it work for me. But like I was going through the hashtags of the locations around this area and looking for accounts of people that were doing things that seemed aligned to my interests. And that's where I picked up working for Women's Fitness magazine via the Ballina hashtag, because I met the Women's Fitness editor through that hashtag. And I just think I'm so grateful that I am such a creepy social media stalker. It made like setting up a business and, so for anyone that doesn't know my background, I worked in corporate communications across Westpac, the Australian Physiotherapy Association and TAFE New South Wales before setting up my own communications and digital marketing agency in Byron Bay. And since doing that, I've, for the last 3 years, shifted my business more towards teaching business owners how to do their own PR.
Yeah, awesome. So the one takeout from that is don't be afraid to be a creepy social media stalker.
Honestly, it brings so much joy to my life and so much fulfillment. Like if I were to do like a scan of the people I know in my life, the vast majority of the people I know who I have really deep, beautiful connections with, I've met through work or through social media.
Yeah, that's really great because I think I sometimes get into the mind frame of, is Instagram and social media actually doing me detriment or is it giving me a positive impact on my life? And I think it comes down to the way that you're using it and how much you're using it as well. But it's kind of nice and it's a good reinforcement to hear that you can get a lot of benefit out of it. And it's not just making you compare your life to someone else and feeling like you don't have enough or why aren't I doing that? But if you actually use it for actually some of the reasons that it was created, you actually have positive impact from it.
Yeah, I think a couple of years ago, Meta came out with some data talking about like mental health and engagement on platforms. And that's why they came up with the concept of meaningful engagement, because they could see the health outcomes for people who had meaningful engagement, where they were back and forth communicating with people via social media versus on there in a looking through the keyhole, observing the lives of others approach. And I think that like data really favored their goals and outcomes to get people more hooked on the platforms. But I do think it's true. Like, if you're really intentional, connecting, chatting and getting new ideas, then it's bloody awesome. But if you're just sitting, coasting and watching the world go by, then it can be like quite taxing. And I think that's where we need to like evaluate why we're there.
Yeah, totally. Now, I hate to use the word pivot, but I'm going to do it. So in COVID, lots of businesses obviously had to change their business model and adapt to all of the lockdowns, especially being in e-commerce. We saw, it was really, we're all very grateful to be in the e-commerce industry over the last couple of years because businesses did have to change to online. So, Overdose as an agency saw a lot of growth, which was really great for us. But how did COVID, if at all, impact your business? And did you see positive or negative effects? And did you have to change anything that you were doing there to kind of meet the demands of not being able to do events in person or workshops in person? Like, how did you kind of work through that?
Yeah, I think probably similar to Overdose, I was really lucky because just on 4 years ago, I did a really big shift in my business. So I feel like I had my COVID the year before COVID in terms for my business. I went from having a agency, a big team, and servicing clients to reassessing what it was that I was doing, definitely triggered by burnout and the challenges that I was met in running a business, to moving towards teaching online. So my business was already, I'm 6 and a bit years into my business, and from day dot, my business was via Zoom and online. So I've been operating in this environment for a while now. So in terms of how it changed my business, the only thing was that I had my son at home to hang out with at lunchtime, and that was really nice. But yeah, it was really, I guess, serendipitous that I had moved my business to be teaching PR to business founders and early stage entrepreneurs, which really suited the climate because people were moving away from full service PR agency because they couldn't afford it, or people were looking for creative ways to reach new audiences. And so my program was perfectly situated. So I was really, really lucky that the last few years, I had record numbers in my programs and some amazing outcomes from that for the clients that came through.
That's awesome. You said the word burnout, so I want to touch on that. I guess, it's an issue that's really hard to navigate, especially when you work in digital, because you are accessible 24/7, especially when you're working across different regions, time zones. For us, we have developers everywhere in the Ukraine, Singapore, Vietnam, Poland, everywhere. We have apps like Slack. Clients are even using WhatsApp these days. So we are accessible 24/7. How do you put boundaries on your work hours, especially when it's your own business?
Yeah. I don't think I have a really cute, nice, buttoned up answer to this. I think that sometimes you have to just be available, and there are moments like that in your business. And I think that goes in waves. There's chapters where you have to go all in and you just have to put that time in there. And it does come with sacrifices to your family time, your social time, your downtime, your mental health. There are compromises there. But I think and Laura gave me this advice really early in my business, which I was really grateful for, actually. I remember going to her, I think it was at the end of the first year, or maybe it was the end of the second year. And I was like, mate, how the frick do you deal with how stressful it is and how always on you are? And her advice was that it's not that it becomes less always on, you get better at dealing with how that feels in yourself. And so it's still always chaotic, but you're better at weathering that storm. And it was really good advice to know that there's still that climate and those demands. You get better at putting boundaries in place. And so for me, I don't hold myself to a standard that I am always available. If I'm not available, I'm not available. But I know the cost to that. I know that that's going to potentially damage a relationship. It potentially might mean less income. But that's a calculation that I've made that I'm happy to make. So, burnout is something that I've probably headbutted a couple of times in my life. And I think, each time you learn a little bit more about yourself and what you need to put in place. And for me, that's, a really, really robust routine in the morning to ensure that I do my breath work, my meditation, I do yoga, I go for a walk on the beach with my dog, and I don't start work until after 9. And that rhythm for me is absolutely essential, because then I can go hard through the day. And I think probably one of the best things that I have implemented in the last year or two is finishing work by 4 or 5 o'clock, which I've never been particularly good at. And that's come from just trying to get into the rhythm with my husband and son so that I'm not like working like a demon at night.
Yeah. No, I think it's really great that you have actually done that, because I remember when you first started out your business and you're like, I'm going to only ever work 4 days a week. And then I'd talk to you like a month later and you're like, I'm working 15-hour days, 6 days a week. And I was like, oh, okay, this sounds great. But now you've actually found that really good balance and, changed, I guess, your business to suit what you need as well.
And I don't necessarily think that I've changed my business to suit me. I think I've gotten to a stage where my business can accommodate that, you know, like, and that's why I say the chapters thing, because I'm really the anti-hustle message, because I actually think that if you want to get ahead and you want to succeed, you do have to go all in. But I just think that what we need to remember is we don't have to do that all the time, because it's addictive. Like, it's really easy to just keep ticking things off the to-do list and just keep getting things done. But the reality is there will always be more things that you can do. And it's more about realizing, you know, that you can leave things on the list and that you know, your business will still keep ticking along. But you have to have a good read of that. And I think if you try and be all like Zen, like having all the balance from the beginning, and in times where you actually really need to hustle, then, you know, the failure rate is pretty real. Like, I think we were talking about this yesterday, like 80% of businesses fail in the first or second year. I can't remember if it's the second year, but like that happens for all manner of reasons. But if you're not willing to go all in the beginning, I think, it does really impact your success.
Yeah, for sure. And just so that you know, I did do 3 minutes of breath work this morning. It was challenging because I'm not a very, for those of you that don't know me, I like to go, 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 go. So to sit down and actually focus on breathing for 3 minutes is actually like, oh God. But I did it and felt pretty good. So
I'm proud of you. And for anyone that wants like a really amazing way to like either get the Xanax effects or the caffeine effect, like both of those things are very easily accessible via different methods of breath work. And for me, that is like such a powerful tool in my business in having access to breath work.
Yeah, awesome. So I guess another, you know, typical phrase that is chucked around a lot is imposter syndrome. I know I certainly have felt this a fair bit over my career and, you know, still do from time to time, which I think is pretty normal. But lots of people get, I guess, you know, afraid by feeling that way. How do you feel about the notion of imposter syndrome? And if you are feeling it, how do you try and work through it?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is a close friend of mine. I don't think, like, you know, there's ever been a time where I've rocked up to, you know, a public speaking event or recording a podcast or doing a bloody webinar or whatever it is where I haven't had to like tackle those thoughts and feelings of not being worthy, getting found out for being a fraud, or, you know, just like all of those feelings that you run through. But it's also something that I've seen across the business landscape, and it's not just my thing. And I think the more we understand that other people are experiencing it, the more we're like, oh, right, okay, that's a thing. But I read something a little while ago about how like the sort of like origins of imposter syndrome being in that sort of the way humans have thrived and survived to be such a dominant force is our community mindedness and how we work as a pack. And like that imposter syndrome is keeping us within the pack and keeping us playing safe. And that served us really well if, like, you know, you went into the forest and there was a wolf or a bear that could, you know, be a genuine threat to us. But we're kind of still operating on that old programming when it comes to doing things that make us scared and that, you know, are stepping outside of our safety. So I guess when I think about it, because heaps of business owners that I work with, they're coming into the PR space and they're like, oh, I'm going to have to stand in front of 100,000 people or, you know, have my thoughts published in a major metro newspaper. And they're like, what the hell? I'm not worthy. I'm a fraud. I'm an imposter. And I think like knowing that that's a process that we all go through is actually really freeing, and realizing it's not our thing to wear, and just going through the process. I saw a TED talk with one of the founders of Atlassian talking about how he got into a stoush with Elon Musk on Twitter when Elon Musk was suggesting that he could solve South Australia's power dilemma a couple of years back. And he was saying how, he was like, it was like an avalanche, because, he sort of threw a stone, and then like the whole like world suddenly was looking at him as an expert on energy. And he was like, it triggered the biggest amount of imposter syndrome. But what he did as a result was go and research the heck out of it and figure out what his stance was, how that world works, like how energy moves, and so then became an expert. And that's what I like to think about imposter syndrome, and particularly in the PR space, because if you feel it, just go and study yourself up so that you can feel confident, do the research, do the preparation, have all of your insights and key messages and facts and figures clear, and you're just going to do a great job. So I kind of like imposter syndrome as a little bit of an incentive to do the work.
Yeah, do the prep work. Yeah, and then you'll feel much more confidence about what you're about to embark on, for sure.
Yeah.
So turning to, I guess, relationships, they're obviously, I think most people would agree, so important in every aspect of your life. But, of course, in business, and especially when you're starting out, they are crucial. For us, it's, our client relationships, our partner networks, internal relationships, the way that the team are feeling and the staff are feeling. Like, we are a service-based business, so our team are everything. For you, obviously, your media network and outlets are so integral to what you do. When you were first starting out and you didn't have a network, how did you build this, and what sort of tips would you give to people who are starting out, and how to cultivate these?
Yeah, well, I guess like, coming back to
social media stalking,
strategic creeping on social media, we've got like a media database at our fingertips with LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. Like, we are so lucky that we live in this age of being able to forge meaningful connections. And meaningful is so key there. I actually received a LinkedIn request from someone this morning, and I screenshot it and sent it to a friend of mine, because we were just recently talking about meaningful connection. And someone had said, hey, I've just been intentionally expanding my network. I noticed that we have 40 connections in common. I'd really love to add you to my network. And I was like, that is like the most algorithmic setup, where someone has just keyed in how many shared connections, this pros, and then automated the heck out of networking. And that could not be closer to the absolute antithesis of what I think networking and relationships is all about. For me, I just think, research and preparation is good for every facet of life, but particularly when it comes to relationship building. And so for me, it's about understanding what it is you want to get out of that relationship. How does that benefit them, and how does it benefit you? And then getting to know them. So coming to meetings or, networking events with information about that person, so that you can be fully equipped to have a good and meaningful conversation. Being unafraid to speak about what your ask is. So what do you want to get out of it? Because there's just no point in, building all of these connections and never know where they're going. That being said, you might not have a really clear ask. It might just be about, building a connection for something in the future. But then the other thing is, particularly for me, it's about building media relationships. So it's reading their content and being really clear on what they write about. And I guess it's very much about less is more. Be connected with less people, but on a deeper level. The irony of that is that I'm such a friend collector, and just love meeting new people and finding out their stories. But I guess come with an open and curious mind to everything that you do, and you will be rewarded deeply.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point around less is more. Like when you're younger and your mum's like, oh, is she your best friend? It's like, no, I have 10 best friends. And it's like, oh, you don't need 10 best friends. You only need a couple. No, I have 10 best friends and 55 second best friends. And as you get older, they start to all drop off, and you realize that you actually only need a couple, and that's all you have time to actually put energy into and develop those relationships. Otherwise, everything is just a little bit half-assed.
Yeah.
Translate that into business relationships as well, where relevant.
Yeah, totally. I think, just going all in and keeping it meaningful.
Yeah. So on the flip side, I was thinking about this morning as I wasn't running on the beach. I was running, near the Flemington Drains, which is still
same but different.
Obviously, like, positive relationships are so important and they're great, but then sometimes you get into a business relationship and it starts off great, and then as you start to work together over time, you realize we're not actually quite the right fit. The partnership's not working. This relationship's actually causing like more headaches than it's worth. What in your eyes is kind of like a business relationship deal breaker? Like, when would you cut ties in that relationship sense, and like when do you know when to cut the ties?
Yeah, right. Well, I guess any working relationship needs to come down to respect, and that's respecting the information that one another need to have access to, and timeliness. So timely responses, courteous and kind behavior, and prompt and timely payment, I think, are probably the key things. So when there's like compromises on any one or two of them, you're kind of looking at something that's like a bit of going to lead to trouble. And I think, it's such a fine balance in business of being a yes person and being really easy to work with. And that's one of the things, it's tricky in the PR landscape in particular, because we are absolutely yes people. We like jump up and down and underneath things for journalists to make sure that we get stories happening and that we do everything in our power to make a story happen. So when a client is, challenging, not forthcoming with information, or doesn't respond in a timely fashion when you've got a time-sensitive media interview, then it doesn't just like lose the opportunity for the client. It also tarnishes our relationship with a journalist. Yeah. So for me, the best way to avoid that is setting the expectations really clear up front. So making people so that each person on both sides knows how you need to work. So lots of the questions for me when onboarding and working with clients are like, how do you like to work? What's the best method of communicating with you, and how can we get a response out of you quickly? Are there certain times a day where you're just totally offline and unavailable? Cool. So that we don't say yes to things with a journalist and then discover, oh, you're always offline until 10 a.m. because of your yoga class or whatever it is. And I think, the same goes both ways. Like, for everyone needs to know, like, really good, clear communication at the end of the day is kind of what saves everything. So it's totally understandable that sometimes invoices might need to be paid late because of cash flow in business. But the best thing that you can do is be open and transparent about it and say, hey, we don't have, we're running late or whatever it is. So bad communication is like the biggest red flag ever.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. So in terms of your business and your brand voice, it is very authentic to you. It's very true to yourself. Obviously, I know you very well. And when you are posting your reels or, your stories on your Instagram, I'm like, I feel like you just couldn't be truer to yourself. And I think a lot of this comes down to also consistency across all of the platforms that you are present on. I think, in this day and age, it is so overwhelming with all the different channels that are out there that you can utilize. You've obviously got your website, you've got Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, there's Snapchat, podcasts, LinkedIn, like TikTok, there's absolutely everything. There's a lot of options. The options are endless, and creating content is a very timely thing to do. And you also need to make sure that you do it right, and that the person that is doing it understands, the brand voice that they are trying to replicate across all of these mediums. With businesses that have quite small teams, and, it's really interesting when we do onboard new clients here at Overdose, they're really big brands, and sometimes their team size, their digital team is like 2 people. And it's like, oh, okay, that really, blows our mind. And obviously we're there to support them there. But content is something that we really want to come from the brand, because it's hard for us to really understand their brand voice. And we feel like it does come best from the client. So, and obviously you don't need to be across all the different platforms. It's not relevant to every business. But for these small teams that need to generate this powerful content, how should they be choosing the right channels to be investing in?
Yeah, well, I guess this is a space that I really operate in with businesses that are lean on resources in those early stages where you're just like, God damn it, I need more humans. But, it just doesn't always happen. I think that, the best strategy is to, again, less is more. Try and find a way to choose 2 channels at max and do them really well. Because if you're, distributing exactly the same content across every channel, you're probably going to miss the nuances of exactly how that channel operates and who that audience is. And the best way that you can understand which of the channels makes most sense to you is to go and interview and research with your ideal customer. Like, where do you operate? Where do you go to relax and unwind and get entertained? And go there. Because if you just make assumptions and, obviously you can go and have a look at data reports and see user behavior, but often smaller businesses don't necessarily have the luxury of that access. But yeah, less channels is definitely key. And I think you're totally right about that brand voice, how important it is for that to come from the brand themselves, because when it is created by an amazing copywriter, often they're quite far removed from your tone of voice and your values and what you stand for, and that, your diehard fans know your voice inside out. So if the content's created 3 or 4 layers away from your center, it really is hard to hit just right.
Yeah. Totally. And I think most of the brands that we work with are really across that. And I think most businesses get that, but it's when it comes down to being time poor and a small team, you do content something that oh, can you help us with that? And we can, but is it going to have the same impact? So yeah, just something, I guess, always to be conscious of there.
And also, I guess, because one of the things that we really vibe on social media as users is the behind the scenes and the rough and messy stories and the human. And when that's not created in-house, it's really hard to get access to that kind of content. And then you're saying, oh, can you please create can you create a video of XYZ? You're better off hiring someone in-house who can be there on the ground and be part of the DNA of the business.
Yeah, totally. So organic search, obviously a very important channel for all businesses. Tell us a bit about how PR supports the SEO space and why it is so important.
Yeah, so PR is one of those fabulous things around trust and reputation and reach. But what digital PR really helps with is the SEO from a backlink perspective, and the clout behind the media publications and the size of their audience and traffic is very lovely for the link juice that comes back to us when we have backlinks from those mastheads to our website. So, considering a digital strategy in the PR space is something that I often recommend for businesses to ensure that they're getting, not just the trust and reputation side of the PR thing, but also the SEO as well. And for a lot of businesses, that's looking at like, what are the key topics that your customers are searching for and looking for, and then creating really beautiful headline ideas that you can pitch to digital publications and get those beautiful stories published and backlinked to your website.
Yeah, awesome. And I guess, that's something that we obviously, intertwine into our ongoing SEO strategy as an agency. After we've done our keyword research, we've made sure that the technical elements of the website are up to scratch so they can be crawled. Then when it's that kind of further optimization, it is around, do you guys engage a PR agency? How are they actually bringing traffic back to the website through the backlinks, through the articles, and making sure that any efforts that they are putting out there with their PR agency or PR provider is actually bringing value in the digital space for them. Otherwise, it's not giving that holistic sense for them. So
yeah, and I think like one of the challenges there is that like lots of mastheads these days have do not follow links and don't provide backlinks. So then it's just understanding that that's not the strategy you're applying there. But one of the really like emerging areas from an SEO perspective is podcasts, and how much the podcast landscape is being so well utilized from a search perspective. And I was telling you, I was chatting with Sarah O'Carroll, who's the editor-in-chief of Forbes Australia, which is launching in September. And she was saying that, the first thing she does when she's researching a story or there's something that she doesn't understand is go and search Apple or Spotify for a particular keyword associated with that thing. And in the example she shared, it was around NFTs and crypto, and go and listen to a couple of podcast episodes to get a head around it. And that's like such a massive opportunity for brands, not just to, like get those backlinks and, from a search perspective, but more also just building that authority and reputation, explaining content. And I think like that thought leadership side of PR is often quite misunderstood, but it's really just about going and sharing how to do things. So what is the explainer content that you can share with your ideal customer and audiences to bring them closer to trusting you? And then they take those next steps via the rest of your marketing mix to get to know what it is that you're selling.
Yeah. And I know you're an avid podcast listener. You told me yesterday that you listen to 8 a day, which actually like rocks me. I don't know how you can consume that many podcasts, but
I was thinking about this morning. I think I should clarify that I do listen to a lot of podcasts on 1.5 speed, but I also do listen to a lot of podcasts that are like 15-minute episodes. So, but like the New York Times and 7 a.m. are like as soon as I wake up to listen to get a read on like the news agenda locally and globally. But then any subject matter, potties are the go. It's the best.
Yeah, they are very good. And like you can multitask while you're learning. So it's great. I've just been like I said, we're chatting too much. We need to start to wrap up. And I know you have a lovely lunch and you need to go herd some cattle this afternoon as well, which is a fun Friday activity. But as a parting question, a bit wanky, but I want to ask it anyway. If you were to speak to your 25-year-old self, or much younger self, not that you're old, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give?
Well, I was thinking about this because like 25, I don't know if I don't feel like I needed the advice that I needed when I was like, say 15. And like I say this just from the perspective of like when I was 15, I had this really strong entrepreneurial urge and I wasn't particularly academic at school, but I knew that I really wanted to work in business, but I didn't have we didn't have like a degree in entrepreneurial studies that they have now. But like my advice back then to little me would be like, follow that and trust that it's really good instinct because like it was there from the beginning. And I think you know, that advice is good at any stage of life, is just to listen to your instinct. We're so used to overriding our gut instinct on things by intellectualizing things and, you know, looking at like what society thinks. And instead, I think just like chase those dreams that you like feel like really instinctively.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat to me. Hopefully someone tuned in and listened to the conversation. I don't know. But hopefully if anyone did, they found it valuable and took away some nuggets of wisdom, because you always have, you know, something really positive to share. Whenever I talk to you, I always walk away going, that was really good advice.
So for the breathing thing.
Well, I'm trying. I'm just not very good at it, but it's just something I need to dedicate more time to. So thank you so much, Odette, and have a wonderful rest of the day, and no doubt I will chat to you soon.
Thanks for having me. It's been a treat.
Okay.